Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I am Chris Stirewalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Heck yes, she is. Welcome to Ink-Stained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana Johnson, are you a Apple Music user, a Spotify user? How do you listen?
Spotify.
Are you prepared at this moment to share your year-end recap?
Sure. I have to say I don't use it all that much because I usually do
This is
podcasts.
hedging. This is hedging. She's hedging.
You know, so how do I find it? Oh, okay. Your 2024 Wrapped is here. Oh, I'm unveiling it for myself.
Exactly. This is exciting.
Okay. Oops.
We've got an early
right.
hint.
Um.
The boss.
So, I'm just turning the volume down. Okay.
We can't call ASCAP. I don't know if we have the copyright.
Wait, so how do
on
I
this.
do it? I have to listen through this? Okay.
All
Let
right.
me see. Thank you, Nate. Life moves fast. I played 1,368 songs this year. Well, it's not a competition. You've changed and so has your listening. I'm sure that's true because I have a feeling there are going to be a lot of Tot Shabbat songs that are
very nice.
atop the list.
Very nice.
Okay, my top artists were... Oh, it's actually not. Lizzo, Sheryl Crow,
Really?
Counting Crows. I love Counting Crows.
Okay.
Yeah. Pink and Sean Colvin.
That is the most female forward
Yeah.
1990s. That if a Subaru was a playlist.
I'm actually surprised that the Indigo Girls didn't make it.
Yeah, that is very impressive. All right, my top five.
And something to talk about was
the Bonnie Raitt version.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
And
Wow. Are you a Lifetime movie?
Yes.
Patrick should look out.
I totally thought there was going to be, my daughter loves this, let me go to my home. This, there's a great little, like Shabbat song, Shabbat song that I play over and over again in the car. So I definitely thought that was going to make it, but.
Okay, my top five are, I'm a little embarrassed about number one because it hit me pretty hard and I listened to it a lot, just doing the songs.
Okay.
I'm Still Fine by the Red Clay Strays, which is it's a little poppy. There's a slight crease in the cowboy hat on that one, and I'm a little embarrassed, but the song slaps, and I'm for it.
Okay.
Charleston Girl, the live version by Tyler Childers. Let's Go by the Cars, which is just crushes. That song just absolutely crushes. This one I will take a lot of heat for. I know from Jessica and others is Comes a Time by Neil Young. I know. It's very, but that's fine. And Tyler Childers, again, rounding out the top five with Feathered Indians. So it was a very post-Sturgill Simpson country music kind of experience for me this year.
Okay, well, I have good listening recommendations.
I'm going to go watch Thelma and Louise, and inspired by I'm going to just do the whole Susan Sarandon oeuvre now that I've heard
provide
yours.
you good inspiration.
I feel inspired.
Yeah.
Maybe I will lose the 6 pounds that I gained over things. Oh, by the way, I know we have to get to the show, but I ate a McRib. Have you had a McRib? So I
can't believe you even asked me that.
I thought of you because thanks to automation,
Okay.
I was able to easily order my McRib with extra onions and pickles my day after Thanksgiving.
That is a good order.
I mean, blam.
Yeah.
The boys and I went out. The only time we went out the day after Thanksgiving was to go get our McRibs. So happy McRib season to all who celebrate.
Yeah, that is a good order. I saw it was even on CNN. I mean, like people were covering this.
We were
news.
there
Kind of
first.
freaks were covering this news.
We were there. We were there first.
I'm sure.
We've dominated McRib coverage
Yeah.
a lot longer than anybody else. They're all Johnny
Not
come latelys.
surprised.
Johnny's come lately. Okay, I will stop being inane, and now we can move on.
I am not surprised that you made it there. All right, Chris,
The fat guy news segment.
You were keen. There's not really a media angle to this story, I have to say, but it's a real news story. The murder on Wednesday morning of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, in the early morning hours, 6:45 a.m. on the streets of Manhattan,
Heading into the Hilton
the Millennium
on
Hilton,
6th Avenue, right
up
there.
the street from Fox, which we both know.
And right in the middle of the whole media conglomerate. It's near CBS. It's near all that stuff. And we've talked before about the New York news effect. So much of the national news media is in New York. Anything that happens in New York is going to get outsized coverage. And when a big news story takes, and this, I don't want to minimize it, this is significant, but when it happens within walking distance of all of the major networks, it's going to get extra coverage.
The other aspect of it was that it was captured on camera, and you could see a gunman in cold blood taking dead aim at this guy and doing it. And then from reading the news coverage, we can see that basically everywhere in New York is under surveillance. And so they can track the assailant using the various cameras all around the city. And the police seem to be doing so, but it was clearly planned, premeditated. It's been reported that the gunman was lying in wait for the guy, knew what door he would come out of, go back into. I'm not clear, actually. Was he going into the hotel or coming out?
He was
of
coming
the hotel?
in because they were having their shareholders meeting there.
Okay. So,
So the guy knew he'd be there for the shareholders meeting. And now there are the reports that on the shell casings found at the scene were delay, depose, deny.
Deny. I think delay, deny.
Delay, deny, and one may be deposed. There were conflicting reports, but this twigs off of the name of a book that was a scathing attack on the health insurance industry and their tactics. And so the media angle, so first of all, it's just the kind of story that the press loves, right? You have this brazen crime, you have a high-profile kind of victim, and the fact that there's a manhunt as we record this going on, because it's, as you pointed out, if everybody's under surveillance, how is it possible that somebody could do this? And then we get to the speculation on motives part. Now, I've read enough. I was going to say I've watched enough Law and Order, but this goes even beyond Law and Order. I've read enough Tom Wolfe books to know that this is an irresistible story, right? What are the real motives? What is it all about? The gunman's still at large. Like as a salacious kind of news story, you couldn't ask for more. But of course, it has to be political, right? And so your friend Taylor Lorenz,
Dear friend of mine.
Your friend, Taylor Lorenz, obliges. When Colin, intrepid producer Colin Chigola, sent this to the group chat, I thought it was fake.
I mean, Chris, everyone was talking about this. So while I do love Colin and he does see things, like Colin and everybody else who has an internet connection was talking about this last night.
I did not. I had not seen.
Well, I don't know where you
this.
were.
I had not. That is not my neighborhood. So what was it?
So she has departed Twitter for Blue Sky, although she actually was tweeting as well. And she wrote on, she responded to a tweet that said, Blue Cross Blue Shield in Connecticut, New York, and Missouri has declared it will no longer pay for anesthesia for the full length of some surgeries, blah, blah, blah. The tweet went on. And she responded, and people wonder why we want these executives dead.
Wow.
Now, beyond that, on Twitter, she retweeted someone who tweeted, just a reminder that Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealth, who was just shot and killed in New York, was a human being with a family. So many of the comments on his murder are despicable, and somebody replied, he will be shown the same empathy he showed for others every single day in like a snarky, nasty way. And she reposted that. So I'll let you say your piece about this, but what grinded my gears about this was that this person was employed by the New York Times and the Washington Post, and we've been talking about her for a long time, saying there's something wrong with this person.
Yeah.
She's not a serious person, and that's been evident for a long time. And it basically took this for other people to start saying it publicly. But this has been obvious for a long time. Like there's she's not well.
Ken Klippenstein, who we talked about here in his departure from The Intercept.
Who never had a perch at the Washington Post or the New York Times, so far as I'm aware. But...
No. But also said he joined this, and he said, today we remember the legacy of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, talking about the denial rate for claim denial rates for United Health, and we should be open to the possibility that the gun person is covering up another kind of crime by trying to make it look political. It could be anything, but the demented state in which a person would have to dwell, in which to believe that. No, maybe let me put it this way. There is an appetite for mob justice, for rough violence in the weird extremes, left and right, that the uprising of the proletariat. And we lived through this do you remember after the Panic of 2008, and they were going to people's homes and they were going after the CEOs, and it was the mob was coming. Just a friendly reminder, mob violence, be it January 6th or killing executives of health insurance companies, isn't desirable because, for a lot of reasons, but also because it's very hard to stop. It's once it gets started, it's very hard to stop. And this is disquieting to me that there are people, even if they are marginal kinds of figures, who are celebrating a murder like this.
Oh, we should add on Loren. She then tweeted the image and name of the Blue Cross Blue Shield CEO out to her many followers. So,
and I flagged also not about this piece, but I found it interesting and somewhat related. I adore Jeff Mauer's I Might Be Wrong podcast and newsletter. And his piece today, the day that we're recording this, maybe Appalachia is secretly pining for Elizabeth Warren. And he takes issue with Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who cites my colleague Sean Trendy. Sorry, Sean. I never trust myself on it because he's not trendy at all. Who had looked at the numbers in my part of America, in Appalachia, and said the Democratic collapse in Appalachia still blows my mind. Just next door in West Virginia, Democrats had a 54-46 advantage in the West Virginia House as late as 2012. 2025, it'll be 1289 the other way. In 2014, the state Senate was 18R 16D. Next session, it'll be 30R 4D. And Sean was talking about the intensity of the flip that happened in Appalachia And Chris Murphy writes, this feels like a problem that requires more than small tactical adjustments to the Democratic brand and information infrastructure. And what Jeff Maurer writes is, if you think that more economic populism of the kind that Lorenz and Klippenstein and others are embracing here is the answer, that is the easiest. That's the easiest way out, right? The easiest way out for Democrats is to say, actually, and it's very predictable. Actually, what we needed to be was a left version of Trump, and the attraction among Democrats to sort of go back to Bernie Sandersism and Elizabeth Warrenism misses two key points. Number one, West Virginia, Appalachia, those places, they were leaving the Democratic Party for a long time, and they were leaving over cultural issues, right? They were leaving over Democrats' positions on global warming, positions on gay marriage, positions on a host of other things where these voters felt alienated from Democrats. But it's the answer isn't if Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren had been the nominee instead of Kamala Harris and had been preaching pitchfork populism that these places would have said, hey, wait a minute, we got to come back at it, is way too simplistic an answer and reverse engineering for people who want to be economically populistic anyway. Harumph.
Chris, should we talk? Oh, so E.J. Dionne
Yes.
had a column in the Washington Post
Yes.
where he writes about his hometown of Fall River, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And he writes, my hometown broke its 100-year Democratic streak. What can that teach us? Gratitude for Fall River, Massachusetts drives me to learn what provoked its rightward shift. And it is about, and he notes that this year I write about my hometown because it made a certain kind of history. The Fall River I remember growing up in, an old-fashioned labor democratic town, a stronghold of New Dealism where unions once thrived, voted for a Republican president for the first time in 100 years. Calvin Coolidge was the last Republican presidential candidate to carry the city in 1924.
Baller.
And he goes on and tries to examine why this happened and concludes there's a terrible irony for Democrats in hemorrhaging working-class votes despite the Biden-Harris administration's resolute focus on blue-collar concerns. The administration's big investment programs were aimed at creating jobs in left-out regions. Their labor and trade policies were good. But investments take time to be felt, and Biden's efforts were obscured by high grocery prices. And he concludes that Trump's not going to do anything for these people, and it's important to win back the working class. I sort of felt like he didn't really understand.
He didn't. He got close. He walked right up to it, and I credit him for writing this piece.
Yeah.
It's a good piece, and he's wrestling with it, and he's thinking about it, and he's talking about it. He only has one paragraph that I saw. Fall River, he writes, is socially conservative. Both these two guys he talked to cited Trump's much-played advertisement against Harris on transgender issues. Quote, pronouns have honked off traditional males to an unbelievable degree, said this one respondent. And, or this one person he interviewed. And both, and this was very insightful, yet both also stressed that the role of gender identity in the campaign was less about attitudes toward transgender people than a symbol to many voters of which groups the Democrats prioritized. The greater the focus on identity politics, this guy said, the more rationale there is for someone to say, you're not paying attention to what I care about. That is 100% right.
Yep.
100% right. Because what Bill Clinton, when he won Fall River, was able to do was convince working class people that he was their advocate. I've said before, and Nate, we have not looked at this. I have not looked at this, but the big question in every election that I always look to is cares about people like me. And when you ask in exit polls or you ask in those things, it cares about people like me. If Democrats seem captured by, and this has been plowed under and over a million times, but if Democrats seem like they're too focused on interest groups, then they don't seem like they're focused on ordinary working class, regular American voters. And I think E.J. Dionne comes back to inevitably, we should do the things that I want to do, right? We should follow the policies that I want to follow economically. So there's still some of the Thomas Frank, what's the matter with Kansas in this? But that does capture it. That it's not just voters' attitudes on those issues. They're not voting necessarily against transgenderism. What they're voting against is a disproportionate focus on these sorts of wedge issues.
Yeah. I thought he missed the cultural piece of this, which is that the sort of milieu in which most Democrats exist now is not that of Fall River, Massachusetts.
It is not. The Charles Murray coming apart answer here is that it's Fishtown and Belmont are his hypothetical towns, and Belmont is now really, really, really Democratic, and Fishtown keeps getting more and more Republican.
Okay, should we talk about the Biden pardon?
Yeah.
The late Sunday night Biden pardon.
Yeah. He's out of here.
The main thing, it seems to me, in terms of the media angle to this is that the press and the American people were misled multiple times about this. And there didn't seem to be a whole lot of outrage about that.
I can't be certain in hindsight that I knew that Joe Biden would definitely pardon his son, but I definitely didn't believe the flat, absolute denials.
Yeah, had a hunch.
Yeah, and I will say this. The desire to roast Biden in the press on this was intense. The blowing up part, and some of it is the lying part, but the other is now, and this is true for Democrats, and this is true for talking heads, and this is true for opinion mongers, and this is true for reporters. Beating Biden up on this has a lot of follow-on benefits. Number one, you're able to, what I call the old GM, when they bankrupted GM, they took all of the liabilities and put it in one company, bankrupted that, and left all the good stuff in the company that was going to go forward. So part of it is pile the sins up on Joe Biden and dump him, get rid of him, and say it was all his fault. Then there's also the prophylactic, which is if you're going to want to beat up on Donald Trump for his abuses of executive power, it will be helpful to have said, I said that Joe Biden should have been drawn and quartered for, you want to get on the record and you want to lay it down so that you have it to say later on.
Okay, there may have been a desire to roast Biden in parts of the press for this, but then there was Politico.
Well, what'd they do?
So they tweeted Republican pounce.
Oh,
Republicans pounce on Biden pardon. That was the initial headline of their article. And then it now reads, although the URL is still the same, Republicans pounce on Biden pardoning his son Hunter. And then the headline now is, Republicans say Biden is a, quote, liar after he pardons Hunter, his son.
Oh, Politico.
And the Republicans called President Joe Biden a liar for pardoning his son, who was convicted on gun charges and pleaded guilty to tax fraud this summer. I mean, it's amazing because Democrats are not happy about this.
No, they're
apoplectic,
yeah.
Because it undermines every argument they want to make against Trump moving forward.
And those who went forward, who sallied forth at the behest of the campaign, Joe Biden, the punishment of Joe Biden's son was their first piece of evidence when they said there is not a two-tiered system of justice. My gosh, look at the president's own son being subjected to the slings and arrows of the criminal justice system. And then Biden says, what do you think, by the way, about the idea of Biden pardoning Trump?
I thought if he was going to do this,
Yeah.
he should have done them together.
Yeah.
And said, we're going to end this
Start over.
practice
Yeah.
of, going after our political enemies and blah, blah. And then it would have been much more palatable. I don't think, sure, Republicans would have objected, but Democrats would have had a much firmer leg to stand on.
He could still do it. The much worse idea that I've heard put forward is that he should pardon preemptively all of the people who Donald Trump might prosecute, so that Trump can't.
Oh, well, that was the New York Times story
Yeah.
yesterday. And then it was interesting. I don't actually know anything about this, but the judge in the Hunter Biden tax case out in California, he vacated the ruling
Okay.
in that case. And he said that his argument in there, first of all, he noted that Hunter Biden, when he asked the court to vacate, he submitted a link to the press release of the pardon, and
Solid
and,
legal work.
And then he writes, like, in short, a press release is not a pardon.
Yeah.
And he smacks him for that. And then he says, he basically says, how can Joe Biden call the officials in his own Justice Department unreasonable people? Because Biden says no reasonable person could think this prosecution. Well, he also notes that Biden says, he was an addict and these things were done in the throes of addiction. And then the judge says, well, he actually admitted to continuing to defraud the government after he was sober, and classifying his business expenses, classifying personal expenses as business expenses, including escorts, luxury clothing, his daughter's law school tuition. So he basically says that even in his freaking press release about the pardon, Biden is lying.
Yeah.
But the most interesting thing he said is that he didn't believe, and I hope I'm getting this right, but this is what I understood when I read it. He didn't believe you could pardon somebody for a future offense. Because Biden's pardon was for
2014 to the
exactly,
1st of December.
But it went through the end of the day that day.
Oh, yeah.
So he said he didn't believe the pardons could go into the future. And he said, well, but that doesn't apply to this case, so I'm not going to get into it. That was really interesting.
I have a feeling the Supreme Court's going to get to rule on that very question during the Trump administration. Can future pardons be issued?
Yeah.
Can I pardon you for future offenses? The galling part of all of it for me is that Hunter Biden made millions of dollars because he was Joe Biden's son. And in the end, the rationale offered for the pardon is that Hunter Biden shouldn't be treated differently than other people because he's Joe Biden's son. That's not how it works. If you want to make money, millions and millions of dollars by selling real or pretend access to your father to these tin horns around the world, if you want to do that, you can do it. But then you ought to get the punishment in the same way on the other side. And this was and I use the word advisedly, a shameful moment. And one of the things that made it so hard for Democrats, and the reason they're so angry, is that they bought the story about Joe Biden, restorer of norms, restorer of democracy, restorer of the good institutions and normalcy in the republic. And they sold it really hard on Joe Biden's behalf. And then at the end, for him to say, never mind, get what you can while the getting's good, I think their anger is rooted in their shame.
What else did we? Oh, our friend Andrew Kaczynski at CNN notes that
This was
Esquire
great.
wrote
This
an
was
entire
great.
piece saying that people should shut the F up about Hunter Biden's pardon, claiming that George H.W. Bush pardoned his son Neil. The
Amazeballs.
entire story has now been corrected to note this is not a thing that happened.
quote, Esquire regrets the error.
Yeah.
And this was Charles Pierce writing in Esquire, wrote a whole piece that was premised on the idea
Good.
that Neil Bush, who was not criminally charged with anything, who was the subject of civil litigation, and it was just fired one off, and the editor's note reads, "This story has been updated. An earlier version stated incorrectly that George H.W. Bush gave a presidential pardon to his son, Neil Bush. Esquire regrets the error." Are we checking anything? Like,
Also, I don't think that you can just say we regret the error if your
No
whole
doubt.
story was
Right.
based on, it's your whole story.
The headline
Like,
on the
you
piece
must
is-
retract the story.
the headline on the piece originally, Hunter Biden isn't the first presidential son
Not
caught up in
sufficient.
controversy.
Yeah.
Anybody remember Neil Bush? Come on.
Yeah, it's not really a sufficient.
Esquire. Come on. But how about Anna Navarro at CNN, who this I enjoyed a lot more because I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old. So The View's Anna Navarro cites completely fake pardon of, quote, Hunter deButts in defense of the Hunter Biden pardon. She apparently asked AI to do some research for her on...
And then admitted it.
Yeah, and good for her, by the way, for admitting what it is. But Hunter deButts slipped past her gaze as she passed it on. Hunter deButts, hardest hit.
It's so good. All right. Should we talk Pete Hegseth?
Yeah, I didn't know about including this New Yorker piece simply because everybody's seen it.
Well, it was interesting because it's like a Jane Mayer special.
It is definitely that. This is the Pete Hegseth secret history, and so here's what's interesting to me about it. So there's the tier one media criticism about she's conflating things, she's shoving together things to create the darkest possible version of events about Pete Hegseth and how things went when he was at Concerned Veterans for America and the other nonprofit that he led and all of that stuff. But then there's this. That article got results, right? So when I talk about how the mainstream media is dead and blah, 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 and other people say, it's fallen. This article, and I'm sure that the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody would have had pieces on Hegseth drinking and his finances and would have done all of that stuff. But this really got the ball rolling, and you saw it in the next 48 hours after the piece landed was Senate Republicans pulling back, Senate Republicans expressing anxiety, talking about Pete Hegseth, and then ultimately the next move was Wall Street Journal has the story, Donald Trump looking at Ron DeSantis to replace Pete Hegseth. I'm not saying all of that is because of this piece, but I was struck how, for all the talk about the death of the mainstream media and the legacy media and all of that, this was an example of a piece that definitely had its intended effect.
I think part of the effect was, and a lot of what's happened with Hegseth is it's a drip, 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 drip. And so this piece came out and it's like, all right, there's more.
Yep, because
This
there
is
had been
not going to stop.
There had been the first piece, the Washington Post piece, about the sexual assault charge that the woman had leveled against Pete Hegseth and the hush money he had paid her. And this was the next, that was knocking around. And then this came out, broadened the playing field, and opened up all these new avenues of attack against him. I wonder, though, have we crossed over the line with Hegseth where Trump will now feel like he can't ditch Hegseth because it will look like he's knuckling under?
So I thought that the Jane Mayer piece, and then NBC News had a piece
About the Fox.
about
Yeah.
his drinking at Fox.
Anonymous Fox
were
sources.
I thought the sourcing in them and the subject matter of them was specifically designed to
Yes.
get to Trump and to make him turn on Hegseth, because Trump is not a drinker,
Right.
doesn't drink, and he does not like people who get drunk. And so I just thought, if there's anything that's gonna like do him in,
So Hegseth
it's
went on
this.
Megyn Kelly's podcast
He did, but
and said he's not going to drink at all at the Defense Department, but then missed, and I don't know whether it was a missed opportunity or not, to say, yeah, I had a drinking problem. He said, no, nobody ever talked to me about my drinking. I've never had a problem with drinking. Never had that. So I guess I put it this way. Everybody's talked about John Tower. Are you a big enough? No, you're not old enough. I'm a big enough nerd that I remember very intently. Wasn't I a fun 14-year-old tracking the John Tower confirmation hearings or in the United States Senate? And Senator John Tower, Democrat, George H.W. Bush appointed to be defense secretary, and stories of his lewd behavior when drunk and frequent drunkenness his fellow Democrats used to scuttle his nomination. The interesting thing is there's an argument that John Tower had unique or special qualifications to be Secretary of Defense. The double problem that Hegseth has is he was already kind of a flyer of an idea. Like, what if, oh, hold on, hear me out. What if we took this guy who doesn't have the typical qualifications to lead this organization? And what if we put him in there to shake it up? And then you say, okay, well, now let's talk about his record. It makes it more challenging. I wonder who, I still think it's Tulsi Gabbard. I still think the one that Senate Republicans say, I think there's a decent chance Pete Hegseth gets through if basically what he's able to say in his hearings is, yeah, I had a drinking problem. I drank too much. I wrote about it in my book. I was self-medicating PTSD, and I'm like a lot of people in the military, but I haven't had a drop in blank, and I vow to you, liquor.
Well, what's taken so long?
Well, he's now moved to the pledge that, and we don't know what he's telling these lawmakers behind closed doors. But it's a long way of saying, I think this is a nomination that is in serious trouble but could be salvaged, depending on how he is able to convince Chuck Grassley, Joni Ernst, a host of people. But I'm still looking over at Tulsi Gabbard, and I say, we need to have Ink Stain Wretches odds on failed nominees. What are the odds? And I think the leader by a decent margin is that they'll knock out Tulsi Gabbard. I think that's too much for Republicans on the Senate intel.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think Hegseth is more likely to go than Gabbard.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about RFK? I think he's more likely than not to make it right now.
Yeah, I think he'll get through.
I put RFK and
Again,
Hegseth in the same basket, which is the Republicans will let it run. They'll have the hearings. They'll see how it goes. If it seems like it's going to wash, they'll take it, let it happen. If it blows up, then they can vote it down. But Gabbard, I think,
RFK, like everything's so exposed with him.
So
There
public.
are no surprises.
we say that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it sure seems that way.
Yes. What could be said of RFK?
Yeah.
Other
definitely
than
seems that
the
way.
bear carcass, the beheaded whale, the brainworm. It's there. It's all there.
Definitely seems that way.
Okay. Why aren't you on Kash Patel's enemies list? Do you feel any disappointment that you are not one of the Washington journalists and elites
I am not disappointed.
targeted by Kash Patel?
I'm not disappointed.
In Kash Patel's book, he published a helpful appendix in which he listed all the people, including my dispatch colleague, Sarah Isger, who should be made to pay for what they did to Donald Trump, including Bill Barr.
Well, that one's kind of obvious.
Why?
Because Barr, in his memoir, writes that when Trump wanted to make Patel deputy
He
FBI,
said, "Over my dead
director,
body."
yeah.
So, but generally, you don't publish the problem with an enemies list.
Well,
Once you
Trump
publish
and his
it,
people, of course, do publish their enemies list. But Trump is a very forgiving man. Like they
that's true.
it's
always
not a permanent.
can always be
he
revised.
Reserves the right to revise.
Can
yeah.
always be revised.
Like he kisses and makes up all the time.
Head down to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
Tell him you were wrong. What do you think Kash Patel, this gambit on Kash Patel, who has?
Oh, I think he's gonna make it.
You think he may?
I do.
You think that the Senate is going to confirm Kash
do.
Patel as the new FBI director?
I do think so. And I think so because, at least up until now, with Gates, senators did not like him personally.
Right.
They had real personal beef. The issues that have come out about Hegseth are personal.
Right.
With Kash, what the stuff people take issue with is ideological.
Right.
And Trump won. I think the Senate's inclined to either Republican senators agree with him or they're inclined to be deferential on this stuff.
I feel like FBI is pretty sensitive for the normies in the Senate on the Judiciary Committee to say, yeah, well, maybe you're going to prosecute your political enemies. Go for it. I'm not saying he couldn't assuage those concerns, but it feels like he was a little hot for the gig. And 4 seats, I keep hearing Senate Republicans saying the same thing, which is the margins are pretty close. And you want to say the margins aren't that close, right? You could lose 4, but they keep talking about that as a hint that it's going to be a grind. And what Trump could do would be get Kash Patel confirmed. I don't even know if he has to get confirmed, but get him installed as deputy at the FBI, and then fire Christopher Wray, and then Patel would ascend to the job without being confirmed for it. So there are things that could happen, but I don't know. I feel like that's a lot. I feel like enemies lists for FBI directors. J. Edgar Hoover was not. It was not generally seen that was a huge success. Intrepid Colin Chicola tells us that he could be installed as the deputy director.
He's gonna make it.
You think he just gets 50 better than 51 votes and sails through?
I don't know if sails through, but I think he'll get 51 votes.
All right. Well, we'll be back with the tip sheet.
Okay.
We'll be back with the parlay.
Okay.
For our own when we launch the Wretches sports gambling app.
And Chris, you wanted to talk about this young lady who works for Mr. Trump, Natalie Harp.
It's funny, yes, and she is this young woman who is derisively called the human printer in Trump world.
Derisive?
Yeah, it feels a little derisive. Who had a portable printer so that she could follow Donald Trump around on the golf course everywhere and give him hard copies of favorable articles, and it also talks about these super creepy letters that she sent to Donald Trump about him being her life and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, her guardian and all of this stuff. It's quite a lot. But the one line, I want to bring you joy, she said to Donald Trump. And now she's going to be, I don't know what gig that she's got in the new White House, but I flag it because we saw it with the leaking from against Boris Epstein. And now we see this. So the leaking, counter leaking, because this is clearly.
Well, if this is designed to hurt her, this is not going to hurt her in Trump's eyes.
Right. But it will make her a figure of the way that they get you in Washington, and certainly in Trump's world. They make you a figure of derision and mockery. right? And you make the principal feel self-conscious about you. And
I don't think that's going to work. She looked cute as a button.
Laura Loomer, to wit, right?
Yeah.
They got Laura Loomer. I don't know whether Trump still listens to Laura Loomer.
I will say they got Laura Loomer in the midst of the campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. That's over.
That's true.
He's not running again.
That's
and
you.
This girl is cute as a button and very loyal to him. And I just thought, of course she works for him. Like, this is, of course, this all makes sense.
It all makes sense.
Yeah.
It all fits.
Yeah.
Well, I flag it just because the leaking leaks. The old Trump leaking is back. And this was a good
Although
example.
there's been a lot less of it.
Yeah, that is true. There's certainly from the campaign, there's been a lot less. And it does feel more like a typical administration where you have to, but doing your Kremlinology of like, okay, now if this story came out, who's this from? Which faction is this? I got to get my chops back up to snuff on knowing the playbill for Trump leakers.
Should we jump to we have one piece of business news before we get to our obsessions, and that is that CBS Evening News has a streaming companion, CBS Evening News Plus, which seems to be takeoff of CNN Plus.
Yep.
RIP.
All pluses, Disney
and
Plus,
so
MGM Plus.
Variety reports CBS News unveiled plans Wednesday to launch CBS Evening News Plus, a 30-minute continuation of its overhauled flagship newscast that will stream online and air on certain CBS-owned stations. Already, the new half-hour program, which will be anchored by John Dickerson, will appear on KCBS in Los Angeles, KPIX in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. Norah O'Donnell will wrap her tenure as the anchor of the venerable CBS Evening News. And, of course, they said they're replacing her with a rotating cast of anchors. So they're basically dispensing with the typical format of an evening news where there's a single anchor.
So in the rotation will be John Dickerson and someone named Maurice Dubois, and chief weathercaster. And this is for the regular CBS Evening News. They're going to have multiple anchors and they're going to add weather to their evening news. Lighten it up. Yeah.
Exciting.
But what do you think about, do you watch any streaming news?
No.
Do you have a television that gives you news options at the bottom of the screen when you turn it on?
I'm not sure, honestly. To be honest, I don't watch a lot of news on television.
About the only news that I watch now is that news that is at the bottom of the screen, and everybody's got a player, including News Nation, has a player through our Hill brand. But I like it more than I do cable news, generally speaking. I like it more than the other stuff because it feels more straightforward and more just the news, more just the facts. So we'll see, CBS.
All right, Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week.
Obsessed.
Where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. And I have a follow-up file.
Follow file.
To the story we've been covering at the Beacon, which is the Harris campaign's $500,000 payment to Al Sharpton's National Action Network, and Sharpton's interview on his MSNBC show of Harris a few days later after those payments landed. It was two $250,000 payments. Without disclosing that the campaign had made these payments to him. So it certainly looks like quid pro quo here, pay for play, whatever you want to call it. MSNBC has said that they were unaware that the transaction took place, but has declined to say whether Sharpton violated any network policies, whether they were taking any action against him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just seems like an untenable position for the network, but they seem determined to skate through this. So the National Black Church Initiative yesterday, which is a coalition that says it represents over 27 million churchgoers and 150,000 Black churches across the country, they said yesterday that the payment to Sharpton's group, quote, puts a moral stain on the integrity of the Black church. The group said it's very concerned by the growing scandal and urged MSNBC to, quote, launch an investigation and express support for Reverend Sharpton's suspension until the investigation is complete. So we did a little research into the group. So this is a Beacon story by Chuck Ross, who's been covering this for us. And they seem like a middle-of-the-road black church group,
They're not weirdos.
particularly political in one way or the other. So that was quite an interesting development. And then, Chris, you wanted to talk about.
Well, I think we should update, since you're obsessing on MSNBC, you should update America on the latest at the ongoing turmoil at MSNBC.
Well, this morning, David Frum went on Morning Joe and among the topics he discussed was the Hegseth nomination. And he made a joking remark that if you're too drunk for Fox, you must be really drunk. And then they cut to commercial break. And according to him, a producer came in his ear, in his little ear microphone and said, watch it. Can't be saying stuff like that. And they came back on the air and moved on to other topics. However, when he left the set, whatever, he was remote from DC and there, wherever they are, Mika Brzezinski got on the air, and let me read exactly what she said. She got on the air and said, I want to read exactly what she said. She said, a little bit earlier in this block, there was a comment made about Fox News and our coverage about Pete Hegseth and the growing number of allegations about his behavior over the years and possible addiction to alcohol or issues with alcohol. The comment was a little too flippant for this moment that we're in. We just want to make that comment as well. We want to make that clear. We have difference in coverage with Fox News, and that's a good debate that we should have often. But right now, I just want to say there's a lot of good people who work at Fox News who care about Pete Hegseth, and we want to leave it at that.
So she says.
So she threw David Frum under the bus. He gets on the Atlantic and writes a piece and says, I think correctly, he says a lot, but among other things, as for my own comments, you can decide for yourself whether I overstepped the proper limits of television discussion. But I also note that if I did misstep, well, my face was on the screen, my name was on the chyron, and anyone who took offense knows whom to blame. And I think that's totally correct. They invited him on the show to give his opinions. The end.
At the end.
And they don't need to invite him back.
They don't need to invite him back.
Presumably
and everybody
he will not be now.
And everybody can have their own thing. They can do their own thing. My obsession is also a little bit of pump cooking. And Jonah Goldberg wrote, writing about the Hunter Biden pardon generally, said something that I had been trying to say, as is very often the case, particularly with my colleagues, Jonah Goldberg and Kevin Williamson. They end up writing or saying the thing that I've been trying to get to, and they get there first and write it better. But Jonah writes this. In all the postmortems over Kamala Harris's defeat, I think those in the media have downplayed one of the most important factors, the media industry itself. Most Americans don't consume a lot of news media, but Democratic politicians and activists follow it intensely, just as Republicans follow Fox News obsessively, though there are important sociological differences. For instance, Joe Biden was a devoted Morning Joe viewer, and you could tell both ways. In political science, there's a thing called the Hawthorne effect. People change their behavior when they know they're being observed. Something similar happens in media. Sunsetting Joe behaved as if he were performing for Morning Joe, and vice versa. Now, Jonah writes, I like Joe Scarborough, parentheses, you wrote that because Scarborough reads you, talk about the Hawthorne effect, the couch. This is what Jonah's longstanding device in his newsletters to have his couch be his critic. But I put it to you, if you make your political choices based on the approval of that Rockefeller Center Greek chorus, you're doing it wrong. The same goes for the Brahmins of the New York Times, Washington Post, the New Yorker, NPR, et cetera. When the Post spiked its endorsement of Kamala Harris, 250,000 people canceled their digital subscriptions. That's a huge number for the Post, but politically, that's the Pauline Kael demographic. The people who think a Washington Post endorsement matters politically are quite simply the last people in the world you should be taking political advice from. I find all the discussions in the mainstream media about how the Democratic Party needs to fix itself to be schadenfreudetastically amusing. Again, most Americans do not take their cues from, quote, corporate media, but corporate Democrats do. Where do you think Democrats got most of their bad or unpopular ideas? Why do you think they were so terrified to seem transphobic or pro-choice? Why did, or pro-police? Why did Latinx have legs for so long? Because Democrats believe the shadows on the wall of the corporate media cave were real. And very well said, very well done. I argued 10 minutes ago that the Jane Mayer piece at the New Yorker still shows the potency and throw weight of mainstream or traditional outlets. But this is a point that we were talking about last week and that we'll talk about again and again. The influence of siloed media inside the silos is great. It seems like an obvious point, but it's more powerful inside the silo than it's outside of the silo. And the legacy media doesn't have the power to move votes, but it sure does have the power to move the Democratic Party. And that is looks obvious once you say it out loud, but a great insight from Brother Jonah.
The Jane Mayer piece, just my 2 cents, would have been meaningless on its own. Would have done nothing, I don't think. It was only that it came amidst lots of other data points.
Yeah. I know.
That it mattered. Okay, Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail.
Do it. Oh, and this one's about ribs. Yay.
We have
ribs.
a note from Dave in Sydney, Australia, who writes, Dear Wretches, please see below a link to the Lily Koi baby back ribs recipe from the Special Broadcasting Service website in Australia. Everyone I have made this for has raved about it. It's a conglomeration on international flavors with influences from Polynesia, Asia, Portugal.
Portugal?
This looks
That's
so
very
good.
specific.
The Americas, including Hawaii, which evolves into a rich, meaty goodness of flavors.
That's how I
Please
like to think
try
of
it,
myself.
And do let me know what you think. This looks so good.
Yeah. Looking very passion fruit pulp.
Oh,
I don't know about passion fruit pulp, but I'm into it. I like this. This is good.
Looks incredible.
Here, another entrant for our rib cook-off.
Yeah, this
Our
looks
coming rib cook-off.
truly amazing.
Dave, good on you.
Yeah, that looks awesome. And we have another note from Colleen Mansueto.
Oh,
from
hello,
Cleveland,
Colleen.
Ohio.
Hello.
My husband's family, who started this, is from Chris's own Wheeling, West Virginia.
Hello, Colleen.
And she writes, an OG listener here. I so enjoyed the Thanksgiving episode. We're having lasagna for Thanksgiving dinner, and I didn't know it was a thing. It started about a decade ago when the whole family was together at a beach house, and the kitchen supplies were less than ideal for a full Thanksgiving turkey dinner. My husband offered to cook Italian for Thanksgiving, and all 13 of us gave a resounding yes. The afternoon snacks was Gugoots, a family favorite.
I believe, and this is where you and I are really going to run into trouble on
Okay.
this. But I believe it's Gugats.
Gugats, okay.
I think. Apologies.
That's a family favorite, sautéed zucchini in olive oil and garlic served with linguine noodles.
Woody.
Dinner menu, bread from a local Italian bakery for garlic bread, homemade red sauce.
Fantastic.
Homemade meatballs cooked in the red sauce all day. Hot and mild Italian sausage. Lasagna and Caesar salad. Prosecco and Chianti Classico for the wine. Dessert was cannoli from the Italian bakery. We now do this every year, regardless.
Beautiful.
Yes, of whether we at the beach or not. Love the show. It's the first podcast I listened to on Friday.
Were the Mansuetos the founders of the trend? It's possible. I don't know. Maybe the rest of America is just following in their
Yeah.
wake. I understand that since the traditional American Thanksgiving dinner is also the ethnic food of my people, I recognize that I have a different set of incentives. So I don't think I'm going to ever give up. By the way, did you have turkey this year?
Yeah.
How was it?
It was amazing. My brother-in-law smoked it.
So yeah. My
And he did the dry brine.
yeah, my father-in-law to be, Jeff Willis, threw down a magnificent smoke on that bird, and it was great. Now, I like turkey skin, and the roast turkey delivers highest on the skin factor, but the quality of the turkey meat was as good as it could possibly be. So, Colleen, I love your idea, but I got to stick with the food of my people.
It was, it was really good. All right, Chris, that brings us to our favorite items of the week. I am forced to say something nice.
This was flagged. This is, I believe, the first ever flagging from my youngest man-child.
Okay.
His older brother has contributed many items over the years to the Inkstained Wretches podcast. But this is my younger son's first contribution, and he hit it out of the park on the first one. This is an ESPN piece about this really. So this is the first year that Texas and Texas A&M have been able to play for, I don't know, a decade, 11 years, because of our insane FACACTA collegiate conference realignment. Texas A&M and Texas haven't played for all these years. And this is a beautiful, wrenching piece. And I won't ruin it. A beautiful, wrenching piece about the infamous tragedy at the Texas A&M bonfire that happened when they were still playing, and how Texas responded, and the power of music. And my favorite hymn is included in it, and it's very beautiful, very well done. Way to go, ESPN.
Well, I have a chess item.
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal had a great piece about a Chinese chess player, Ding Liren.
Okay.
Liren. He won the chess world title. Then he forgot how to win at chess.
What?
So this guy, who's 30 years old, was, they write, on the top of the chess world. He had displayed nerves of steel to sweep aside his Russian opponent and become China's first ever world champion. Not only was he now a national hero and $1.3 million richer, he was also playing the chess of his life. At a time when the ancient game was more popular than ever before, Ding had conquered it. Then he promptly fell apart. Over the course of the following year, the player whose reign was just beginning started playing worse than he had in ages. Even more troubling, Ding was seemingly incapable of winning a single game right when he was supposed to be preparing his title defense. At one point, Ding went 304 days without a single victory in classical chess. And the article goes on to recount how he got his footing back. And it is fascinating.
That is fascinating.
I recommend it.
That is fascinating.
So it notes that at the very end, they say he ultimately prevailed. So he manages to, in 2022, he delivered such a strong performance at the candidates tournament that it earned him the opportunity to play a Russian player for the world title. He ultimately prevailed only for his form to immediately go into free fall. But if he can win again, he's hoping to actually savor the victory. I cried last time, Ding said. This time, I may smile.
Oh.
Yeah.
You got all the best chess news. You really are my go-to source for chess news.
It's great.
That is great.
That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.
Do it.